grandfather, who is the seed of Ahu Acha. He came from Calcutta, stick and a bag on his shoulder, with a banana capra. So I am part seed of India. He internship on this level, find together two races in unity.
Acha no see.
There was no more mother Africa, no more mother India, just mother Trinity.
Jana mommy.
My Bahuka planted sugar cane, down in the Jaroni plain. So Ram Logan passed their percussion. Shadi Pai, brotherhood on the board.
Shadi Pai,
Brotherhood on the board.
Shadi Pai. Choose race with a color, Mahuta had to make that journey for I to have sympathy. So it is a great privilege to have such unique heritage. 50% Africa, 50% India. I have joined today to holiday, emancipation and arrival day. Angala, Suala.
This battle Razak made a journey, 150 years gone already. So whether you're Hindu, Muslim, Christian, let's walk this land hand in hand. We could only prosper if we try. Shahadi Pai, brotherhood on the board.
Shadi Pai,
Brotherhood on the board.
Shadi Pai.
Kumaye, Zimbabwe, Kumaye, Zimbabwe, I know. Kumaye. If you want to know the truth, they catch it back to you. And somewhere on that journey, you will see a man in a dhoti saying he prays in front of a chanty. Then and only then you'll understand what is the cosmopolitan nation. There's no room for prejudice at all. United we stand, divided we fall. So whether you're Muslim, Hindu, Christian, just know that in this land we could only prosper if we try. Shadi Pai, brotherhood on the board.
Shadi Pai,
Brotherhood on the board.
Shadi Pai. We should learn to be one. Our ancestors came by boat. Take the salt water in your throat. You see, from an Amanda, great grandpa and grandmama. One was a slave and one was in danger. But the religion was a color. They interfere with their love for each other. Nahi, nahi. I am proof of racial unity, and that is the way everyone should be. Everyone should have his one in their prayer. Let's show each other we care. As we all know, incoming Malhai, unity is strength. Brotherhood on the board. Brotherhood on the board. want to Israel and me Trinity. Where the Humaye. In the way. Humaye in the way.
Greetings in the name of Olodumare, the one living God. Our nation needs food. So we had to call on the ancestors. Mala Jerry, oh, la poesía.
Shango la poesía.
Yeah, Mala Jerry, oh, Baba la poesía.
Shango la poesía.
Oye, Mala Jerry, oh, la poesía. Shango.
Shango la poesía.
Yeah, Mala Jerry, oh, la poesía.
Shango la poesía.
Ding, 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 ding. Yes, I have heard that my ancestors was from Nigeria, and that is why I'm carrying the name of Suna. Deep inside of me, I just wasn't satisfied. So I did some good searching and asked myself, who am I? Then I found out John African was my great-grandfather, and he was from an African tribe called Yoruba. He is from Pebble Village, yes, that was my great-aunt. So in the name of Orisha, I greet you all with a chant. Yes, Shango Baba Wa, Shango Lodo, Karele, Shango Baba Wa, Olodo, Kabilesio. Hey, Shango Baba Wa, day that day, la 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 day, la day. I discover my religious practice is Orisha. With the help of the Vincent grand ancestor, through their spiritual efforts, I have found the truth. Thanks to Olodumare, I'm standing firm on my roots. Now that I know me calabash, me oil, and me hobi, these were just some of the things taken from me. So when you see me in peace, I'm not looking for obia. No, sir, I come to chant and pay my respects to the Orisha. Ah, Shango Baba Wa, Shango Lodo, Karele, Shango Baba Wa, Olodo, Kamile, Sio. Play drum, Shango Baba Wa, day, 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 Shango Baba Wa, Olodo, Kamile, Sio. Ding, 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 la, la, ding, ding, ding. I discover my passion is Oshuna and Osa. I must go have a super Shango and Jaja. Through manifestation, I could reach the other side to meet with my ancestors and visit the river Nile. With a voice like that great archangel, I could touch your soul, both spiritual and carnal. I could bring you transported into Africa. I am an Orisha priest, they call me the Amungwa. Hey, Shango Baba Wa, Shango Lodo, Karele, Shango Baba Wa, Olodo, Kabile, Sio. Hey, Shango Baba Wa, day, 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 Shango Lodo, Karele, Shango Baba Wa, Olodo, Kabile, Dawona Baba. Hello, Dawona. Yeah, Bunny Shango, Dawona Baba. So in the street, when people stop to congratulate me, commenting on how much yes, the judges have robbed me. What the judges said to me didn't mean a thing, because I knew long before last year I was born a king. So when I sing, guys, so that's to feed my family. But when I sing Orisha, it's to pay homage to my deity. Alado ye abaku, so that's my tribal cry. I'm so proud I could stand and explain to you who am I. I am Shango Baba Wa, Shango Rodo, Arele, Shango Baba Wa, Rodo, Kabile, Dio. Hey, Shango Baba Wa, Ding Ding Ding, Shango Baba Wa, Rodo, Kabile, Dio. Shango Baba Wa, Shango Rodo, Kabile, Shango Baba Wa, Rodo. Dio. Sing the thing. Shango Baba Wa, Shango Lodo, Karele, Shango Baba Wa, Olodo, Kabile. Shango Baba Wa, Shango Lodo, Karele, Shango Baba Wa, Olodo, Kabile. Shango Baba Wa, Shango Lodo, Karele, Shango Baba Wa, Olodo, Kabile.
Shango Baba Wa. Baba Wa. Sugar Alos, Michael Osuna. Who am I? Who am I? Before that, we heard Brother Marvin Jahaji Bai. Brotherhood of the Boat. I want to dedicate that first calypso, Jahaji Bai, to Pandit Ubraj Narayan, who says not a Bai. Jahaji Bai, Brotherhood of the Boat. When Africans were on the boat, we turned Mati. When Indians on the boat, they become Jahaji Bai. I said, you by Narayan, he can't complain to the whole world. That times call him by. I love Pandit. I love Pandit. But you know, God, sometimes I wonder, you know, I am sure Pandit know. I'm sure Pandit know about Jahaji Bai. But he want to make trouble. And Jahaji Bai, by Brother Marvin, making the point through the lens of the Indian, Trinidadian, Indian, West Indian, arguing for national unity. But he's arguing for national unity through the eyes of the Indian. Quite an interesting calypso because it's been sung by an African who's making his plea for national unity, not through the eyes of the African, but through the eyes of the Indian. It was quite an uproar when he sang that calypso. It remains one of my favorite calypso because of the nuance in it. Like I said, an African making a plea for unity, not through the eyes of an African, but through the eyes of the Indian, the Jahaji Bai. The Jahaji Bai. And I recommend that calypso for Pandit Narayan, that you should listen it over and over again. There's a difference between boy, when a white man call a black man boy. You know, that's different. This is Bai, B-H-A-I, Jahaji Bai. You know, we grew up in the village, and you know, that's you Hines Bai, you Alexander Bai.
It's different from boy. All right. And I think sometimes that's why I'm an advocate of teaching Creolese in school. Because in the process of teaching Creolese, we are going to be able to teach our culture. The Alexander boy is different from boy. Yet Pandit plain, he don't understand that. You know, our Indian sisters and brothers, oh baya, you know, yet he gonna complain to the world. Dr. Hines disparage him. Pandit, I love you. You laid down on the road for black people, and I will continue to love you for that. And I want to report that to the world, because I will never forget that. I will never forget that. You laid down on the road for black people. But sometimes you just overtalk. Every time you hear black people say something, they're talking race, you know? And you know, you need to ease up with that. Jaji Bai. And then later on, Sugar Alus, an African who was saying, I'm Trinidadian, but my origins in Africa. My name Osuna didn't come from Trinidad. It came from Africa. And you see the Trinidadians there. That's the biggest show. That's the semifinals of the Calypso competition. It's the Fiesta. It's usually held in San Fernando, the biggest crowd. And you see those African and some non-African people there doing the Shango. I rather guy. I the Guyanese, I ain't giving up my Guyanese for nothing. As West Indian, as a Caribbean man, as a West Indian, but as Guyanese, I ain't giving it up. But sometimes when I listen to popular music in Trinidad, the Calypso, I wish we in Guyana do some more of that. I mean, the critique. And so I played those two Calypsos to show two Africans dealing with the issue of race. One through the eyes of the Indian, saying, no more Mother Africa, no more Mother India, is now Trinidad. We are Trinidadian, we are West Indian. And the other African is saying, wait a minute, I is Trinidadian, I is West Indian, but there is Mother Africa. And I know there's Mother Africa when I do me Orisha. I know there's Mother Africa when I take me Gobi, me Calabash. I know that there is Mother Africa when I eat me Kanki. So, Brother Marvin, when you say there's no more Mother Africa, you colorblind, which means you're blind. You know, interesting discourse. And I think if we have some more of that public discourse in Guyana, our people become more literate about race. You know, that we wouldn't be in this nonsense if somebody opened their mouth and say African, them is racist. It's disgusting when you hear Guyanese with that nonsense from top to bottom. And not only Indian people, African people, you hear sometimes with that foolishness. And that is what people like myself and Vincent Alexander, Nigel Hughes, that is what we've been trying to do for the last couple of years. I said, look, you know, African people are legitimately part of this country, and their culture, their feelings are important, and their culture and their presence is unique because of the unique experience that they went through. And for that, we are called racist. We are called racist rather than engage in a public debate. Here are men and women who are engaged in the process of restoration. Because reparations is about repairing damage that was done by slavery and colonialism. And restoration is part of reparation. The International Decade of the People of African Descent, about recognition of our presence, but people are trying to erase the African presence and saying, come and join we. and forget about your unique culture. Forget about your uniqueness. Forget about recognizing your contributions to our country and our region and to the world by extension. So I still Guyanese, but I wish we in our popular culture can rise to the point where Trinidad is, or where Jamaica is, where popular culture becomes a form not just of entertainment, but popular culture becomes historical memory, teaches us history. Popular culture becomes what? Affirmation of identity. Who am I? I am an African. Affirmation, using popular culture as a form of affirmation of identity. Popular music, popular culture as a form of rebuke, social rebuke, social rebuke. Popular culture as a form of debate. Popular culture as a form of advocacy. Advocating for democracy, advocating for fairness, advocating for justice, advocating for cultural tolerance and cultural unity based on equity. The popular music, the popular culture must play those roles. We only know of the role of entertainment, and that's a very, very important role. But popular music and popular culture has other roles. Popular music as protest and resistance. So I love my Guyana. I ain't giving it up. I'm not about to move to Trinidad. But I think the Trinidadians and the Jamaicans have taken the music, the popular music, to another level. And they have their debates in the music. In the music. I mean, Gypsy sing Little Black Boy, in which he engages in black self-critique, critiquing the black youth. And then he's answered by other Calypsonians, right? He's answered by other Calypsonians. Pink Panther answers him, the real little black boy. Where Gypsy's talking about the little black boy who's the tote. The little black boy who up on the street smoking drugs. And then Pink Panther said, but the real little black boy is C.L.R. James. The real black boy is Eric Williams. The real little black boy is Atto Bolden. And they have that debate in the music. But in Guyana, Sugar allows for saying, who am I? He would be called a racist. They would put him in jail for saying that. They will say he's preaching race and division. That's my 2 cents. Good evening to you all, and welcome. Vincent is here, and we have lots to talk about. So let's go and engage. Pandit, if you're listening, I dedicate those 2 calypsos to you, especially J.R.G. Bai. J.R.G. Bai. Make your choice whether you want to apologize to me for anyhow, we are teachers, and sometimes we have stubborn students. Vincent Alexander, good evening.
Good evening, David. Good evening.
And some people think that it's only since Ipada G was formed a couple of years ago that you became an African, or an Africanist, as they say in the thing. But you have been engaging this issue of race, ethnicity, pluralism, the M.G. Smith formulation of creolization. You have been engaging that issue for a very long time. In fact, I have an article that you wrote in a magazine called Caribbean Dialogue that I keep on my desk because I'm engaging in some writing now. In the last couple of years, I've had to put writing on the back burner, but I think I'm slowly getting back there. So there are lots of work that I have that are unfinished. And so I have that article that you wrote there more than 20 years ago in Caribbean Dialogue. What is it about our country, Guyana, that allows for that kind of jaundiced view of this notion of race, ethnicity, culture, politics, creolization, pluralism, etc.?
This has a lot to do with our evolution as a nation. A nation which is built on diversity, and therefore a culture which is in itself diverse, in this sense of the word, culture being the expression of people's way of life, the expression of people's way of life. And coming from diverse backgrounds, certainly our expression, both in form and content, would be diverse in as much as the extent to which we have been mixing. There will be moments also of expression, form and content that will represent the evolution of a people, a diverse people, and will represent what may be referred to as unity in diversity. And so I think we have to accept the plurality of our existence, given the history of our coming together, but also to recognize that we have ended up in one place, and that the only way that we will be able to grow and develop in this place is if we approach our existence from the standpoint of coexistence, not from the standpoint of getting rid of one, dominating by another, but from the standpoint of coexistence. And incidentally, some of these terms have found themselves into the lexicon of democracy. So, for example, in a true democracy, if there ever is, there's a question of inclusion. How do you ensure that all are involved, all are included? And I think in cultural expressions, Martin Carter spoke about that. All are involved and all are consumed. But even as he spoke about all involved and others consumed, he's very conscious of the fact that he was speaking about and to a plural and diverse society. And it has to be built on recognition of that diversity, even as we recognize the symbiotic relationship that that diversity can facilitate and the commonalities that we will experience because we all live in the same place and there's some things in this place that are not peculiar to a group but are peculiar to the place and all of the people in this place in which we live. And so it is bothering when we have situations where natural expression is being suppressed. So, for example, we know that calypsos turned out to be one of the natural forms of expression, particularly for the people of African descent. But we've also had calypsonians coming from the Indo-Guyanese community and from the Amerindian Guyanese community. Like they say, from all the communities. When we get to a situation where it is suppressed, then it is in fact a suppression of a people and their right of expression and even their existence because it's a part of their existence. And so we're in a very sad place today where when we have our Calypso Jamboree in February, that no longer are people free to express things as they see them and as they feel them and as they live them. They are subjected to censorship. A minister says, this is what you can sing, and this is what you cannot sing. And it's happening both at the level of the school competition, where the children are saying, these are the themes you must use, and then their songs are subsequently censored. And in the adult and junior calypso competition, you have to submit your script for approval. And so we see an element here of a dictatorship and imposition and an attempt to obliterate the people's form of expression, both in its form and its content. Because if you don't allow them to use that form to express themselves, which is their content, then the form is of no meaning. The two go hand in hand. And so I think we have to have the recognition of who we are and culturally our diversity, culturally the unity that can evolve from that diversity because of us being in one place and having to interact for survival, and to ensure that there is no suppression or oppression of that natural form of existence and natural form of expression. So
Vincent,
I David, grew up in that era of black power. And so that would have brought some level of curiosity and consciousness to me. I had the great honor and privilege of spending some of my formative years, my last adolescent years in Africa. And what that has done for me is to help me to understand that I am essentially an African Guyanese, with Africa being the adjective, Africa being the adjective, Guyanese being the noun, so that my noun person is qualified by my adjective, African, is qualified by that, because that is where the heritage is. The extent to which people of African descent are here is the extent to which something was transplanted. This thing was not aborted here, it was transplanted and has grown and produced further generations. But it has its origin in Africa, which is not just a place, but it's a people and a way of life which has been transplanted. And obviously, in a different environment, you had mutations taking place, but that never negates the origin, and therefore never negates the essence of the being called an African Guyanese. In the same way in which it does not negate the essence of a being called an Indian Guyanese, or an Amerindian, or a Portuguese, or a Chinese Guyanese. But in the modern world, there is scope for the hybrids. There is scope for what, in a natural process of socialization, may be called creolization. Even in that process of creolization, the seed comes through with its product, and there's an understanding of the origins of this one thing we're talking about, and that the origin is not one, that the origin is that through that process of hibernation, of bringing together, of ensuring that there is some kind of unity emerging from a diversity which will live on, a diversity which will live on, because elements of the beings that have been brought together will continue to exist. And it is those elements, in fact, that give identity to the new person who sometimes we want to talk about, the Guyana man. But the Guyana man is a growth out of a hibernation of the African man, the Indian man, the Portuguese man, and their being live on in this person referred to, the Guyana man. Hence, we can talk about the African Guyanese, the Indian Guyanese, etc., etc.
Etc. Vincent Alexander, quite a lot there, Vincent, and you are so right. One of our Calypso kings is the mighty chief, Amerindian, and I think I think he won that year with the Calypso on Power Sharing, I think was the name of his Calypso. It was around
In fact, we have two Amerindians who were the Calypso monarchs, the mighty chief, and there was another Amerindian, a younger guy who came from the village in Mabaruma. I'm not remembering his name right now. Unfortunately, he's deceased, pretty young.
Yes,
but he also.
I remember him. Yes,
he also was a Calypso monarch.
Was a Calypso monarch? Yes, I remember him. He died pretty young. You Calypso people out there, if you can put your hand on the Calypso by the mighty chief, I've been looking for it and can't put my hand on it. Please. In Trinidad, they have Chinese. I mean, Attila de Horn was one of the pioneers of Calypso. Crazy Edwin Ayong is his name. Chinese man. He mixed with Chinese and Spanish. His mother was Venezuelan. His mother was Venezuelan mixed with black. And his father was Chinese. And if you talk to Crazy, he would say he's a black man. Very interesting. And that is why the Caribbean is an interesting space. Because Crazy will say, Crazy! It's a black man. But he's Chinese. He's half Chinese. He would say another half Spanish. But when you put it together, it's African. And that's why we are such an interesting place. Dennis Plummer, who is one of the women that is won the Calypso monarch, is a white girl. She's white Trini. And but if you talk to Dennis Plummer, she's black, because there was a big uproar in Trinidad. How come this white girl singing Kaiso and so on? And she stood her ground and said, I have a right to sing Calypso because I have African in me too. It may not be there in terms of my color, but you cannot escape the African influence on those of us who are not phenotypically Africans. Vincent, before we go on to GCOM, which is really what we, Vivian Jordan, the chief name was Vivian Jordan. Yes, Cyril, I can depend on this audience. You're all sharp like a razor blade. I made the point about Trinidad, and I've grappled with this whole notion because some scholars and activists have said Trinidad has moved beyond the Guyana in terms of the race issue, right? And I've grappled with it because I don't think it's as clear-cut as that. Yet, and this is my view and I want your thoughts on it, I think at the level of public discourse in the popular culture and so on, I think Trinidad has gone further than us. Whether that amounts to the fact that Trinidad has gone further than Guyana in a general sense is debatable. Your thesis of pluralism and the problem in Guyana that we have not accepted our pluralism. First of all, would you say that Trinidad is ahead of Guyana in terms of grappling with the race? And if so, is it because they have accepted the pluralism a little bit more than Guyanese have accepted.
I would say Trinidad is ahead, and I'm not saying so off the top of my head. I spent a little while in Trinidad on a fellowship at the University of the West Indies in ISA, Institute of Social and Economic Research, and that was 91, 92. I had the opportunity in 91, 92 as an ordinary person to witness the elections campaign in Trinidad. I was first of all shocked when Pandey went to Hilo in St. Augustine and said to the people unabashedly, "It's we turn now.
Hmm.
It's we turn now." And Hilo and Pandey was being ethnic. We turn now meant it was the Indo Trinidadians time. I really was shocked that you can have that level of openness. In retrospect, that openness is in recognition of a state of things which we try to deny in Guyana. So whilst I don't embrace what Pandey said or did, I see it as a recognition and not running away from the fact of the diversity of the society and the diversity of the political poles in Trinidad and Tobago. But having said that, after those elections, when I saw the way in which the results were accepted, I came back to Ghana. I wrote an article, it should be archives in the Chronicle, in which I says we have to learn the culture of winning and losing from the Trinidadians. I actually wrote that article, I think it was in early 1992. We have to learn the culture of winning and losing because the way in which they settled down to normal life after a brutal election suggested that they had learned the culture of winning and losing. I think the difference between Trinidad and Guyana is that their politics has not been as poisonous as our politics has been. And so whilst they have experienced the diversity and the natural division, they have not had that injection of poison that causes the division to be more consciously pursued, to be more consciously pursued. Also, the manner in which they have settled in Trinidad, I don't think they are as on they have enclaves in the same magnitude as we have enclaves. And you know, our situation of enclaves has a lot to do with the way in which enslavement came to an end. People occupied villages, indentures were bought and settled. And so we have harder enclaves than they have. And therefore, the process of hibernation, so to speak, of creating the hybrid has not been affected in the manner in which ours has been affected with poison politics and physical, spatial separation. And in addition to that, because of that poisoning not having taken place, there has been greater acceptance across the divide and greater respect and acceptance across the divide. And that is why Calypso and Carnival and Parang are what they are in Trinidad. They're things that may have had their origin in one ethnic group, but certainly the process, these are Creole institutions, so to speak. Creole institutions that represent the marriage of the various ethnic groups. So I think that Trinidad and Tobago is ahead of us. I know that they still have some division, and a lot of the division in Trinidad is seen not only from a ethnic perspective, but an ethno-religious perspective, from an ethno-religious perspective. And I dare say that one of the problems they are faced with is like in Guyana, there are some people who have set out to push back against the natural process of creolization. And I would suggest that the Hindu fundamentalists in Trinidad, like some in Guyana, have consciously pushed back against the natural process of creolization. And that is where the division persists in Trinidad. And that is where the division is fueled in Guyana.
In Guyana, Vincent Alexander. You know, Vincent, I was talking to a young Guyanese school teacher a couple of days ago, and I was pointing out to that person that because we were talking about race, and she wanted to get a sense of why people like yourself and myself are called racist. And I pointed out to her that perhaps the person who has the label racist most, EUC Kwayana, is the person that advocated for sharing of power sharing in 1961. And when you fast forward 40 years later, we're a group of us, you, myself, Eric Phillips, Aubrey Norton, who they today call Africanists and racists. We were the ones who were out there pushing for power sharing. So it's these so-called African racists who are at the forefront of sharing and coming together and living together. And she said, but why this is not acknowledged in the public space? Because I'm hearing it from you. I believe you, right? But it's not something that I hear, I see in the media, I see on the internet. Talk to me a little bit about that.
No, I think that has a lot to do with the poisoning on one hand, and I would also suggest it has a lot to do with class. It has a lot to do with class, and that the manifestation of the class element, I think, came at the beginning of the 20th century, where the bourgeois or the capitalist Indians sought to create what they call an Indian colony by bringing more indentured Indians to Guyana, who they would be exploiting. That should be noted. Who would they be exploiting? But in their process of seeking to bring an exploit, they could not foster a unity in the working class. So they had to, in some regards, do things to perpetuate the division which the British did in British interests was now being done in class interests. And so their position was we will bring more Indo-Guyanese, and they were coming essentially to be involved in agriculture. They were going to be the entrepreneurs, the exploiter class, so to speak, exploiting their fellow Indians in the first instance. But what they were going to do is, after a period of exploitation, they would allow those Indians to into the society to be involved in whatever they wanted to be involved in, as they brought more Indians. So there were two processes. They were seeking to create the colony by overwhelming the country with an Indian population. And then they were seeking to have Indian bourgeois dominance by being the ones who were in business, exploiting the fellow Indians and exploiting all others, but not allowing class solidarity among the working people, using ethnicity as the basis. So they sought to have some kind of ethnic solidarity, even as they had class divisions. But they used the ethnic solidarity to ensure their class dominance. And in this instance, the class dominance was not just a class, but it was the Indian bourgeois class. And so we are having some of that today as well. That is
Yes.
what we are confronted with today as well,
Uh-huh.
where there's a large, predominantly an Indian bourgeois class pursuing capitalist and exploitative uh, agenda, but entrenching themselves in the context of ethnic solidarity, so that you don't have the kind of uprising intra ethnic uprising, and at the same time you don't have inter ethnic working class solidarity, and that's what we are confronted with. And I would go further to argue that over time the People's Progressive Party has graduated from being a party that was essentially grounded in Marxism, unfortunately dogmatic Marxism, and therefore not necessarily addressing the Ghana situation as it should be addressed. It has morphed into a party that is now a pro-business party. However, in that process, it has retained the political elements of quote-unquote communism. So it has retained those elements, and they use those elements for control and dominance. But it is control and dominance by essentially a pro-business class. So
Okay.
it's a very complex configuration of our society,
Very
which some people seem not to understand. And you must accept that wherever you have class, notwithstanding the dominance of the Indo-Guyanese capitalist class, there will emerge people from other ethnic groups of that class as well, and therefore you may have sometimes a facade of ethnic solidarity, which is in fact really class solidarity.
This is class solidarity, race and class, which we must grapple with. Vincent Alexander here in that group of power sharing advocates in the early 2000s, Takuma Ogunse and McAllister, James McAllister was also part of that group. Vincent, I want to get your thoughts on an issue that has animated me, and I'm trying to make sense of it, sometimes here publicly on this show, but sometimes privately trying to reflect on it. In all my decades of observing Guyanese politics, I have never seen an almost universal drive among mainly African Guyanese, but we can broaden it to say PNC support base, which could include mostly African Guyanese, but also some Indians. I've never seen an almost universal drive for unity among the so-called opposition. I mean, I'm happy for it because I think it says something about where those of us who believe in power sharing, where we ultimately must go. So I'm glad for it. But I'm trying to understand it. What is it that is driving this almost universal? I mean, I looked on all day. I spent most of the day because you had statements from some of the political activists. You know, we had statements from Jarito Fernandes, from Rickford Burke, from Amanza Walton, all calling on the opposition leaders to come. I hope it's not too late, but and then I took time to read the comments under that, and it's almost a universal thing for unity among the opposition forces. What are your thoughts? What's driving that in the year 2025?
When you have very little to share, there's not much to fight over.
Yeah.
When there's much to be shared, then there's much to fight over. And in that regard, the fight takes on a ethno-class dimension. And with the nature of the intra-class relationship on one hand, then those who seem to be both materially and psychologically, this is important as well, not only materially, materially and psychologically, because that is where the differentiation occurs in the working class, that they may all be materially suffering, but they may be in different places psychologically. And so the Indo-Guyanese may find himself in a different place psychologically to the Afro-Guyanese. And I'm talking about the working people here, although they are in the same place materially. And fortunately or unfortunately, human beings are not driven by objectivism. Human beings tend to be more driven by subjectivism. And subjectivism is manifest in the psyche of the people. And so, in the context of what real Guyana is at today, that it's almost a natural force because of where they are at materially and where they are at psychologically has brought them together and created a consciousness and a recognition that if they don't work collectively, then even though they may have disparate interests, if they don't work collectively, the disparate interests are threatened. And so really, it has a lot to do with the environment in which we are living and the elements of that environment that have impacted the people, and out of that impact, driven them into certain formations. I would lay that out as my contention in this regard. I think I have to apologize for this reason, that I was recently schooled, as I said, I should try not to be professorial in my presentations. No, I'm not attempting to be professorial. I have emerged this way in terms of my articulation. But I apologize because I recognize that sometimes it may not lend to the effectiveness of the communication as we attempt to speak to the people at large. And so, in other words, we need to recognize that we are a society that's divided ethnically based on our history. We need to recognize that on each side of that divide, there is solidarity because of the nature of human existence. And however, in all of that, there's something called some people who have control over the levers of material existence in our society and political power. And those people are not all of any one ethnic group. It's a class that resides in that ethnic group. And therefore, um, they use their being to exploit all, but to suppress the rebellion of some on the contention that they are all of one ethnicity and there should be ethnic solidarity.
ethnic solidarity. And the mighty VJ, Vivian Jordan. Yes. Uh, you're at home here, Vincent. You know quite well we have diverse shows on social media, Guyanese, and I think our people go to different shows for different things. I mean, the very name of this show, Politics 101. I mean, people say they're in class, right? And so they're, they're much more tolerant of professorial presentations on a program like this. This program and Paul Slow program usually are classes. Not that the other programs are not, but I think people expect a certain kind of articulation here. So I don't think the problem exists here. Good evening to you, Gladys. I have heard from you, seen you for a long time, but I'm sure you're always here. Vincent, let's pivot to GCOM because a lot has been happening over there in recent days. And there's a lot for you to bring us up to date with. Today, just before I came onto this program, I saw the news story where GCOM now has a new form for presidential candidates. I hope
a new nomination form.
A new nomination form. And the opposition nominated commissioners support it, but feel that at this late hour to introduce a new nomination form may not be the best thing. Walk us through what is this new form, why the new form, and why you and your colleagues take the position that it probably is not the best thing to introduce them now.
All right. A integral part, critical part of our election process is to submit your list of candidates. So each party has to submit a list of candidates. But you can't just simply put down people's name as your list of candidates. You have to get supporters to say we support this list. So you know that this is not child's play, that is serious business because the people who are putting themselves forward have supporters. And elections really are about having supporters. So each party has to go out into the field, identify their candidates, make sure their candidates are on the voters list, and then they have to go and get supporters for the list of candidates. And in our circumstances, you have to get 11 sets. In fact, 12, I think, of supporters. Because you have to get supporters for your national list, and then we have 10 constituencies, so you have to get supporters for each constituency list. And then we have the regions as well, and you have to get supporters because all of these are different candidates being nominated. What we discovered, or what became very obvious in the last local government elections, was that rather than going out there and getting supporters who are supposed to give their signature to who they're supporting, that some parties got the names of people, inserted their names as supporters, and signed for them. So there was clearly one signature across sometimes dozens and dozens of names. So the actual people who were said to be the supporters had not signed, and the Lord knows whether they really were supporters. And so what GCOM decided belatedly to do was to adjust the form so as to specify in the last column that it is the signature of the nominators that should go in that column. So that people can't say, well, we didn't know, that we couldn't sign, because the form now specifies that it is the signature of the nominator. That in itself is not bad. What is troublesome is that this has now been introduced when in fact the old form that did not have that head in the last column had already been put out by GCOM for political parties to download and to start their work. Difficulty that creates is this: that if you have to go and get these signatures from all over the place, 10 constituencies, 10 regions, 10 regional councils, a national list, then signatures have got to be gotten from the hinterland and so. And the question is, if a party has gone out, expended resources to travel to the hinterland to do this work, has brought back those signatures, you're now saying to them, go and do it again, which has cost attached. And whilst we are of the view that the elephant, so to speak, the parties in parliament may have the capacity to respond to this belated initiative, small parties can have problems. Small parties can have problems because it calls not only for financial resources, it calls for manpower to run the country again to get that exercise done. And so, our contention is, look, whilst we agree with this new form, we have to find a way in which we do not penalize persons who have not filled the new form, or we do not impose upon persons who have filled the old form to go and fill the new form. So that, yes, we can put the form out there, we can encourage that form be used, but we should not penalize those who may have used the old form. And into the future, we'll perfect that arrangement, but we cannot be unresponsive to the reality of people having to expend time and resources to fill those forms, and that some may have already done so at significant cost and may not be in a position to repeat the process. And so, in all fairness, they should not be denied because they haven't filled the new form. And they will allow me to use this moment to go to what I wanted to say to preface tonight's interaction. Our interaction is about elections. That's what it's about. Elections. Elections has two critical elements. One critical element is allowing parties and individuals to present themselves to be elected. And the other critical element is allowing the population to express their preference in relation to those who presented themselves to be elected. Those are critical elements. And I think we need to understand that because the issues which we want to address are issues which are intended to ensure that those who want to present themselves to be elected are not impeded in that process, that there's nothing that there are no obstacles in their way. That if there are obstacles, we remove the obstacles, we minimize the obstacles. And similarly, the people who want to exercise their preference are not hindered from exercising their preference. And in addition to them not being hindered, each of them exercising their preference should be valued in the same way. So the system should not allow for people to exercise a preference that they're not entitled to. The result of which is to devalue the preference exercised by others. Let me break that down. If we have 10 persons who are eligible to vote, right? 10 who are eligible to vote, and 8 of them turn up, and 5 vote for one party, and 3 vote for the other party, then the will of the majority prevails. One person, one vote. But if of that 8, of that 10, we said 8 turn up, 2 don't turn up, but those who turn up find a way to duplicate, represent themselves twice, and therefore have 2 votes and create 10 voters when there are only 8 present. Then the impact of the 1 vote of those who voted once is decreased, and the result may well be reflective of a rigged arrangement, because those who vote twice may prevail, but they are prevailing not on the basis of one person, one vote. They prevail on the basis of voting for persons who were not there and participants in the voting process. So, as we prepare for elections, we have to be aware of those 3 things. It is natural that we have to provide for our candidates to be able to present themselves, and the first issue we addressed speaks to that. Don't do anything that will inhibit the candidates from presenting themselves. And if you're going to bring out this list late, and they already went and do the work, you're inhibiting people from presenting themselves. On the other hand, don't do anything that would inhibit the voters, the electorate, from being able to vote. And thirdly, don't do anything that distorts the reality of the votes entitled to be cast. Don't do anything. So that all the things we are talking about, we have to talk about them against that background. And so I thought that before we go ahead with the other questions you will pose, that I elaborate what is it we're really dealing with. And that anyone who gets involved in anything that inhibits any of those 3 things that I referred to is in fact interfering with the elections being free and fair. And so for me, whenever I talk about GCOM's preparedness, I'm not talking about if GCOM simply publish a list, distribute a form, set up a polling station. No, 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 no. Those mechanical things, GCOM may well do. But I'm talking about GCOM ensuring in all of that, that there's no impediment to the candidates presenting themselves. There's no impediment to the voters being able to vote. And there is no distortion of the votes by fraudulent votes, and therefore distortion of the results of the elections. And if the results of the elections are distorted, then the elections in fact are ineffective because they don't achieve the result that they were intended to achieve. That is a result reflecting the will of the people, one man, one vote.
One man, one vote, Vincent Alexander. Vincent, uh, the issue of workers, GCOM workers, party workers on election day, voting outside of their place of residence, is both a logistical problem or a logistical issue, but it's a logistical issue that has political implications. And GCOM, by a majority, voted to deny people the opportunity, workers, election workers, the opportunity of voting outside of the place of residence in the coming election. You opposed it. Why?
Now, first of all, the only people who they have voted not to be given certificates of employment to vote in the place where they are deployed, where they are working on election day, are the polling agents. So the workers are not affected.
GCOM workers are not affected.
They're not affected. It's the political parties polling agents. Transport workers, in fact, can get certificates of employment. So if you're working on transport boat and you end up in Supernam on election day and you had processed yourself, you can go and vote in Supernam. The people who are affected are the polling agents. GCOM workers are not affected. Now, prior to 2011, with the present law in place, GCOM used to allow the political parties workers to get certificates of employment and to vote in the place where they're working. So we used to do it up to 2011. In 2011, there was a debate on this matter. And we looked at the law and they said, well, look, the law does not really provide for what we were doing and we should follow the law. And so in 2011, a decision was taken that we are following the law and therefore we would not give to the political workers certificates of employment. But I need to say that even as we made that decision, one Mr. Gokul Budu gave to PPP political workers certificates of employment. 2011. And I'm not guessing about this. I'm not speaking third hand about this. I personally came across that situation at the Alexander Village Nursery School on election day in 2011. In fact, a political worker in the field brought it to my attention that his people can't vote, the PV people voting, what's going on? And when I inquired, I discovered that Budu had given to them certificates of employment, which he was not supposed to have done, and in fact had said to us that he had not done. I made inquiries in other places across the country, and other people in other places attested to a similar pattern. In fact, in Linden it was said that 50 such were given out. Let me interject and make one point in here. Elections are about numbers. Elections are about numbers. And the things I talked about earlier, particularly the one vote and so, is about numbers. It's about numbers. And so if you don't, if you give some people an advantage, they can go and vote and others can't go and vote, you're impacting the numbers situation. In a country, 2011, 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028, 2029, 2030, 2031, 2032, 2033, 2034, 2035, 2036, 2037, 2038, 2039, 2040, 2041, 2042, 2043, 2044, 2045, 2046, 2047, 2048, 2049, 2050, 2051, 2052, 2053, 2054, 2055, 2056, 2057, 2058, 2059, 2060, 2061, 2062, 2063, 2064, 2065, 2066, 2067, 2068, 2069, 2070, 2071, 2072, 2073, 2074, 2075, 2076, 2077, 2078, 2079, 2080, 2081, 2082, 2083, 2084, 2085, 2086, 2087, 2088, 2089, 2090, 2091, 2092, 2093, 2094, 2095, 2096, 2097, 2098, 2099, 2000, 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2020, the difference between the political parties has been 1 seat. So here in Guyana, small numbers make a difference. You don't got to do it big. Small numbers can make a difference because of the closeness between the parties. So this discussion came back up in 2020. And our contention is, in the context of a constitution which says that everyone should be given the opportunity to cast his or her vote, given the importance and critical nature of numbers, and given the fact that parties may not be able to get workers from every single division, and we are talking about getting workers for about 3,000 polling stations, they may have to deploy people from one division to another, that those people should be given certificates of employment so that their right to vote is not impeded. And on the other hand, they do not have to abandon their posts to go somewhere else and to leave a loophole in the system for untoward things to occur. So you got one or two things could happen. Either they can't get the vote because they stay put, or they could leave and then there's a loophole and mischief could occur. And so we are saying, give them these documents. Now, of course, the law, in its literary interpretation, does not provide for it. And therefore, our position has been, for some time now, ask the legislature to simply change the law and say these people are included in those who are entitled to certificates of employment. There are two problems. GCOM, with its 4-3 arrangement, has done everything not to ask the legislature to make any changes. That's the first point I want to make. GCOM's pushing back and saying it's not their responsibility to ask the legislator, that the legislator has its own role and GCOM has its own role. My contention is, if GCOM sees that there is something, a deficiency in its system that can be corrected by the law, then GCOM has the responsibility to say to the lawmakers, here is this efficiency, give us the tools to do a proper job. Now, there are people pushing back on that. That is not GCOM business to have these, to initiate these changes. Secondly, the AG has stepped in with the argument that the amendment to RUPA, which provides for alternate polling agents, resolves the problem. And that is that a party can now appoint 2 polling agents to each of its posts, a substantive and an alternate. And what he is saying is that he has provided for a situation where the substantive could get up, go somewhere else and vote, and the alternate will step in that period of time. That is true. But is it workable? If my party can't find somebody in Bonasico, down in the river, a creek off the Essequibo River, who come from Bonasico, and I have to get someone else to send in there to make sure that there's no cheating, you're posing me 2 problems right away. You're telling me not only to get 1, but to get 2. But to get 2. But not only are you saying to me that I should get 2, but when you consider the logistics of where I may be sending the person from, even in the circumstance of 2, how are they maneuvering so that both of them could be in the right place at the right time to cast a vote? The solution really is to give a certificate of employment. The law has not resolved the problem. The law he talking about has not resolved the problem. Because if I send my man down in Bonasica and I identify an alternate, obviously it can't be an alternate from Bonasica because they have somebody in Bonasica. So it got to be alternate from somewhere else. So you're creating this issue now of the person also having to travel, who want to travel out, who want to travel back in. It's a logistical nightmare and virtually not a feasible solution. And so we are contending that these people should really get certificates of employment. And GCOM must push back. The 4-3 arrangement is saying no certificates of employment. This can significantly impact our circumstances, particularly for small parties, in the circumstance where every vote counts. So this impacts the question of every vote being cast and every vote counting. So that is one of the instances where, in my humble opinion, GCOM is not true to its mandate, and GCOM is being used as an instrument to disenfranchise people on one hand, or to create loopholes in the system for other mischief to occur.
And that's such a very, because you have over 3,000 polling stations. If half is affected, if a party is affected by half, that is 1,500 votes. In an election that's decided by one seat.
That's the issue.
In an election, those 1,500 votes will make a difference.
So I can only conclude that those who are voting against it have an interest in those numbers.
In those numbers. And if those people stay, if those people get up and go and vote, then it's 1,500 boxes instead of 47 the last time that was stamped.
That was susceptible.
Lord. This, I mean, I'm laughing, but this is serious business. This is, Vincent, I just want to publicly thank you and your two brothers, commissioners, for really staying on top of this. I mean, some people are saying that you all should resign and go. I mean, if you all were not there, I mean, I'm a normally sensible person, but without your explanation, the thing would not be clear to me as it is how just on that issue alone, an election could be won or lost. I just want to thank you all, although you all are outvoted, but to stay there and to be on top of that and to be able to come here and explain to our people what's going on. I think history will at some point record that human service that you all have given. This is bizarre. This is bizarre. One other issue, Vincent, and this is the issue of persons who are incarcerated, especially people who are on remand. They're not being convicted. They're on remand either because they get put on bail or they get put on bail but can't afford bail. And these people are now being denied the right to vote. Explain to us why, and again, if you have 5,000 people on remand and who are affected by that's a seat.
The issue is numbers.
It's numbers.
The issue is numbers.
It's numbers. And we know the prison population itself has an ethnic slant to it. An ethnicity in Guyana / party. This is, anyhow, talk to us about this issue of prison.
So that over the years we have not allowed the prisoners to vote, the incarcerated persons to vote. Reviewing our system, trying to get it better, trying to fulfill our mandate, we have come up with the idea that the incarcerated person should be allowed to vote. This too has led to a prolonged confrontation. The confrontation has come to the point where no one in GCOM can now deny the fact that these people are entitled to vote. So they have conceded, yes, they're entitled to vote. They're more or less conceded. But they're saying that though they're entitled, that their freedom is restricted by virtue of being incarcerated, and that impacts their virtually their right in the sense to exercise their entitlement. That's one of the arguments, that these people here incarcerated, they have legally been restricted in terms of exercising their freedom, and one of the freedoms is voting. So that too is touched. Now, the fact of the matter is that our constitution is unequivocal in its expression that every Guyanese who is entitled by virtue of citizenship and age to vote should be allowed to vote, barring two categories: persons who are insane, and those persons have to have a certificate of insanity, and persons who've committed election offenses, they're debarred for a 5-year period. So that here again I contend that GCOM has an obligation to make it happen. GCOM has an obligation to make it happen. So we have those who are saying, well, we ain't got no obligation because these people freedom was curtailed. The chairperson, on the other hand, has gone to some law, Prisons Act, and said, well, you know, GCOM can't, the law says that you can't speak to prisoners. People are curtailed from speaking to prisoners. And so, how are we going to allow them to vote if we can't talk to them? Well, I have a number of responses. I must confess I haven't gone back to check that law. But that law cannot supersede our constitution. That's my first position.
Mm-hmm.
The law can't supersede the constitution. That law probably predates our constitution, and in the normal course of legislation, the more recent legislation supersedes the previous. And not only in this instance is a question of which one is more recent, it's a question the constitution is superior, it's a higher level of law.
Yes.
So don't bring that trash to me that some laws say we can't talk to the prisoners. Because there's a law which says they must be able to vote.
To vote.
And therefore any impediment has to be dealt with, because that higher law entitles them. And we as GCOM have an obligation to facilitate people being able to cast their vote. So the chair's position is, well, we got this law problem. And with one set of commissioners saying, forget this matter, let's get on with the business. Another set saying, no, these people should be allowed to vote. She has taken the position, but I can refer this matter to the AG.
The Attorney General.
Now, that too is problematic from this perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Our position is that this matter is not to be referred for advice. This matter is to be referred for legislation. But you're not quite sure how she is speaking, whether she is going to be forthright and say to the AG, GCOM is requesting this legislation, as opposed to, here's an issue, what do you think about it? You get the impression that that's the approach that she's likely to use in the context of a commissioner saying that we got to have a unanimous decision if we were to go to the AG. Got to get a unanimous decision. Suddenly, decisions got to be unanimous. When in this instance, 3 commissioners saying that people should be able to vote. The chairperson saying, all right, let's see if we can do it this way. And they're saying no. So in a sense, you have a decision that's a minimal decision for going to the AG to find out something. And them say, no, 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 it got to be unanimous. If it ain't unanimous, no action should be taken. So again, there seem to be people who have an interest in denying thousands of people from voting. And the point you made is also critical. That even if we were to concede that the people who are on sentence, the freedom is curtailed, what about those who are on remand? We've got people on remand for 5, 6, or even 10 years in this country. We've got people on remand. And I would even go to disaggregate those who are imprisoned and the freedom curtailed. A man gone to jail because he paid child support. And you're saying to the man who imprisoning him for that child support that another important thing that he should do is to cast his vote, because he get locked up for not doing one of the things he's supposed to do, pay child support, then he can't do the other one, which he should also be doing as a citizen of this country. So we have that problem. We left it at her saying she will speak with the AG. I saw a commissioner who opposes that, proudly saying to the press that the matter is being reverted to the AG. But the press should know that that commissioner didn't support the contention of the thing being taken to the AG. Commission objected, but now seeking to associate himself with an action that is being taken as if he is somebody supporting these elements which are critical to our democracy.
Vincent Alexander here tonight. Vincent, we are quickly running out of time. If there is anything that I didn't get to ask you, and I suspect there may be one or two things, you can use the next couple of minutes.
There's one, let me mention one other critical one.
Yes.
Elections is about numbers. We have had serious issues with numbers in terms of 49 boxes not being validated and thousands being allegedly being voted for. Numbers issues. Biometrics was intended in the absence of a new voters list. Biometrics was intended to try to deal with this problem of multiple voting. If you use fingerprints, you can be very happy somebody come and vote twice. They throw that out. We have a mischief we want to tackle. And the mischief is that there must be no allegations that somebody vote twice. That each vote must have the same value. We therefore moved on and said, all right, we know the court got a problem with a new voters list. We ain't solved the problem. Y'all don't want biometrics. The reason is not good, it's not logical, but you don't want it to use your 4-3 to deny us biometrics. Let us now use the law, the National Registration Act, Regulation 40, which says that and this is not a law we're making up now, it's on the books, that the chief immigration officer should periodically provide to the Commission of Registration the names of Guyanese who have been out of the country for an extended period. The law says that. So we're not asking the police to do anything they're not entitled, obligated to do. The law says that. With one commissioner responses, you are creating concubinage. You're now getting the police involved in electoral matters. We're only asking for the chief immigration officer to provide us with the list that the law says he should be providing. And once he provided, he's out of the business. That's nothing else to do with this matter. The law says the commissioner of registration can then put to use that information. And our suggestion is that the usage should be put to simply highlight those names on the voter list. Highlight those names. Why? So that in the face of the contention that people have been voting twice and probably thrice, using the names of people who are not present, that the names of the people who are not likely to be present be highlighted, thus allowing for the GCOM officials and for the polling agents to be more vigilant and alert in the identification of voters. So when somebody turn up and the name is one that's highlighted, they will exercise greater vigilance. If the person is the right person, by all means vote your name on the list. But if the person turns out not to be the right person, obviously. So that this should act as a deterrent in the first instance, people knowing that this mechanism is this about me taking the chance. If it doesn't act as a deterrent, it acts as a prevention, because when they turn up and the system works in terms of identification of the person, then they will not be allowed to vote and the system will work. And so we would be able to deal with the mischief that has been evident, a mischief which has occurred of multiple voting, a mischief which all the parties have recognized. Because the most vociferous person in 2015 about this mischief was one Barajaglio. It's there in the public record of him saying that people stuff the ballot box and all that. And we are now saying, let us deal with this through this mechanism. And that has been thrown out. That has been thrown out. So there are people who have an interest in not putting in place the best machinery for free and fair elections, but are trying to use spurious arguments to justify not doing what should be done. All sorts of arguments. Some of them will, this thing requires the law. Well, my position is simple. Have the law changed if it requires the law. I'm not sure it requires the law, but if you're saying it requires that, have the law changed. Don't object, period, to addressing an issue that is in our face. In our face. So we have that problem that also remains unresolved. And so my contention is that we might have elections, but that what GCOM has neglected to do has created a situation where there is no guarantee that those elections will be free and will be fair. Because the flaws in the system can allow multiple voting. The flaws in the system can allow deny some people to vote. And all of those things impact the numbers. The elections about numbers, and unless you secure your numbers, then you're not securing a system in a manner for it to be free and fair. So I don't care what anybody says. Let them show that these things which we are talking about are not real and ought to be addressed. And if they can't show that, and since they can't show that, what they are doing is embracing the election with the potential, the magnitude of which I can't speak to, but the potential to be not free and not fear.
Not fear, not fear. Vincent, thank you again. Thank you so much. I want to join with Leslie and all of us here on Politics 101 and the larger opposition support base and the Guyanese community at large. Thank you. Thank Mr. Corbyn, Mr. Trotman. Thank you all so much for staying there and raising these issues. I'm saying that for somebody like myself who have to keep up with these things, without these explanations, I would not have a clear picture. Can you imagine our people who have to get up every day and go out and work and don't have the time to study these issues, but can spend an hour or 2 hours in the night on these programs? The information that you are giving them is invaluable. Thank you so much.
May I say that the situation has gotten so bad that we are literally cursed and abused in GCOM for advancing these matters. Literally cursed, literally abused. Who is old, who should go home, who is a rigger, who for 18 years you didn't want any change, now you suddenly want change. Literally, the discussion does not focus on the issue. The discussion seeks to abuse the messenger.
We take
Literally.
note. We take note. We take note. Vincent, thank you again, my brother. And to you, the audience, so much to digest, but we have to, because we're up against it. We're doing two things. We're trying to win an election, but we're also trying to win the conditions for free and fair elections. Quite a task, but we've been down this road before, and we have to stay put. Yes, 2.5 months is not a long time, but sometimes in politics, 2.5 months could be 2.5 years. I'll see you all tomorrow night when we will continue to bring these issues to the fore and to discuss, to educate, to mobilize, and to be ready to do everything within the law and within reason to ensure that we win the right to free and fair elections and ultimately the right to change government, especially this government that has done so much to turn our country backwards rather than forwards. I see you all tomorrow night. Same time, same channel.